Good morning, everyone. How are you all doing on this bright, sunny day? Anyone out there? Oh, yeah. Hey, I'm Adam Smith. I'm the executive director of Comic Con Museum, and we've got a special pop-up program here to go along with the pop-up museum. With me on the stage is Andrew Farago, who is the curator of the Cartoon Art Museum in San Francisco, which you should all go and visit if you haven't. It's a really awesome cartoon art museum. Andrew's put together a presentation on 80 years of Batman. What he's going to do is go through the entire history of Batman from 1939 until the present day. He's one of the most knowledgeable people in the world, not just about Batman, but about comics in general. So please give a warm welcome to Andrew and enjoy his presentation.
All right, good morning, everybody. I am thrilled to be here at the Comic-Con Museum. As Adam mentioned, I have been affiliated with the Cartoon Art Museum in San Francisco since 2000, so I'm excited to be here. I love to see what they're doing here in San Diego. And as he mentioned, I'm also the author of the forthcoming Batman: The Definitive History, published by Insight Editions this fall. And I'm going to take you through the complete history of Batman, 1939 to 2019. And we're going to start at the very beginning. How many recognize Detective Comics number 27? Okay. So, written by Bill Finger, illustrated by Bob Kane. This is where it all began. So, Superman was a big hit for national periodic publications in 1938. And they commissioned a new superhero. They wanted to take advantage of the superhero craze, so they suggested to artist Bob Kane that he might like to create his own superhero. Kane teamed up with his friend Bill Finger, and they came up with Batman, who was going to be the headliner for Detective Comics. And the very first Detective Comics story, The Case of the Chemical Syndicate, was a detective story, and it also had one special mystery, which was the identity of Batman himself. So how many of you know Batman's identity? Yes. Bruce Wayne. The kids in the audience know it's Bruce Wayne. And that was not revealed until the very end of the very first Batman story in 1939. Batman proved so popular that in addition to Detective Comics, he was given his own magazine in 1940 called Batman. And just the month before that was introduced, he got his kid sidekick, Robin, the boy wonder. And this was a very popular best-selling magazine, and circulation was through the roof. Everybody loved Batman and Robin, couldn't get enough of these guys. And it was a great time. Bob Kane could not do all the artwork himself, so he branched out. He hired additional artists, including Jerry Robinson, who came on and did some very visually striking comics in the early 40s. 1942, America's at war, so World War II is underway. Batman and Superman, the two most popular characters from DC Comics, were both featured in World's Finest Comics. They wanted to make sure that they had enough Batman on the stands to meet demand. So Batman, Robin, and Superman were featured every month in World's Finest Comics. They did not appear in stories together right away. They just appeared on the covers. And here they are selling war bonds. So it was a very patriotic time for America. They were really pushing things like war bonds and patriotism, and had very bright, colorful covers on the stands. Kids wanted escapism. They wanted fun, flashy, exciting comic book stories, and Batman and Robin and Superman provided that. 1943, Batman was so popular that they decided to branch out and do movies. So the very first Batman movies came out. These were movie serials in 1943. Lewis Wilson played Batman. And you can see it's not the flashy, exciting, modern costumes that you see in Batman movies. This looks kind of homemade. You'll probably see actually better costumes at Comic-Con today. But it was still fun. This was a weekly serial. Kids and their parents could go to the movies every weekend, see a new installment of Batman's adventures. Okay, 1944, Batman's getting a little more fun, a little more silly. As comic relief, they introduced his butler, Alfred. So Alfred was originally kind of a heavy-set character, but Alfred appeared in the movie serials in the 1940s, and because they had a skinnier British actor playing Alfred, they decided to change him in the comic books to make him match what you saw in the movie serials. And Batman and Robin are so excited that they can't help but bring Alfred out on stage and introduce him to the whole world. And so Batman, who started as the dark, mysterious character, is getting a little lighter. His adventures are getting a little sillier. By 1945, this is again toward the end of World War II, Batman and Robin would team up with not just Superman, but they would team up with characters like Santa Claus. So this is Batman and Robin and Santa in a late 1945 cover. And you all recognize this guy, right? So this is the Joker. This is Batman's most popular recurring foe. He was introduced in 1940 in Batman #1. And this is a cover by Jerry Robinson, a very talented artist who joined the Batman production team very early on and was responsible for creating the Joker and also Robin. So Joker, never let a good idea go unused. He would tap Batman's ideas. So he made his own utility belt. He made his own Joker signal, his own Joker mobile. And you can see things are getting a little bit brighter, a little bit sillier in the 1940s as they progress. And everybody in the 1940s loved Robin. So Robin actually got his own stories all by himself without Batman in the 1940s. So 1947, he got his own feature in Star Spangled Comics. And Robin actually appeared in more stories in the golden age of comics than Batman, because he co-starred in every Batman story, but he also had his own solo feature here in Star Spangled Comics. So that's how popular the kid's sidekicks were in the 1940s. 1948, we get our first detailed look at the origin of Batman. So this is where we learn that a mugger named Joe Chill killed Batman's parents, Bruce Wayne's parents, and that set him down the path to become the world's greatest detective. 1949, we get our second look at Batman in the movies. So this is another movie serial. This is Robert Lowry, dressed in Batman. Again, you'll probably see better costumes on the convention floor at Comic-Con, but it was fun, it was exciting. Kids got to see Batman and Robin on the big screen. Robin actually looks like he might be a little bit older than Batman in this picture, which is kind of fun. And the 50s, the Batman adventures are getting a little bit even lighter, even sillier. This is the strange costumes of Batman. So you get to see Batman with all the resources of Bruce Wayne, was never short of wardrobe changes. So anytime he needed a special costume, whether it was underwater, outer space, in the Arctic, he was always ready to go. 1951, we first get to see the secret origin of the man behind the red hood. Does anybody know who's behind the red hood? The Joker, right. This is 1951. We first learn the secret origin of the Joker, and we learn about the tragic accident that transformed him from an anonymous criminal into the criminal mastermind known as the Joker. So 1952, we saw World's Finest Comics earlier. We saw Batman and Robin and Superman teaming up on the cover of World's Finest Comics. In 1952, they finally met in a story for the very first time. So they teamed up to rescue Lois Lane, and this kicked off a series of adventures where they would team up almost every month for the next 3 decades, Batman and Robin starring in World's Finest Comics together. And you can see comics are getting a little bit sillier. As other publishers got darker, as we got more crime stories and horror stories and murder mysteries, we got increasingly strange and silly stories in the Batman comics. So this is the gorilla boss of Gotham City. You get to see Batman and Robin fighting a gangster whose brain had been transplanted into a giant gorilla. And so by 1954, those horror stories that I mentioned, people were increasingly nervous about superheroes and about those comics and their influence on kids. So publishers like DC started to go even more kid-friendly, even more silly with their stories. So this is one of the last times for a while that we'll see Catwoman. This is 1954. And they wanted to keep Batman stories a little tamer, a little bit sillier, a little bit lighter and goofier. So characters like Catwoman went away, and we saw more characters like this, Ace the Bat-Hound. So Batman's dog with his own secret identity, wearing a mask, had adventures with him in the 1950s. So 1955, Batman and Robin first teamed with Ace the Bat-Hound. The next year, we didn't see characters like Catwoman, but we saw heroic characters like Batwoman. So Batwoman teamed up with Batman for the first time in 1956. And her secret identity was Kathy Kane. Kane, the same name as Batman co-creator Bob Kane. And again, I mentioned the comics getting a little bit sillier, a little bit lighter. So by 1957, you had Batman wearing rainbow outfits, having increasingly strange adventures. He went to Planet X the following year. So he borrowed a lot of tricks from Superman. So Superman was a very popular, best-selling comic for DC Comics at the time. And Batman became increasingly like Superman. He had a dog sidekick. He had a girl version of himself. And he appeared in more imaginary stories, like the marriage of Batman and Batwoman. So Robin is heartbroken that Batman is going to leave him to his own devices as he marries Batwoman. And so you're seeing more and more imaginary stories. You're seeing more crazy outer space, pretend stories, silly things from Batman. The following year, he joined the Justice League, and Batman's popularity was actually on the decline at this point. You can see, even though he's a member of the Justice League, he didn't make the front cover. So he and Superman are in this story, but they're not on the front cover. And Batman actually would not be a regular cover character in the Justice League comic book for several years. Okay, and Batman sales, again, are on the decline in the early 60s. You see a lot of reprints of classic Batman material. And I know from comic creators and historians that people saw Batman as kind of old-fashioned and silly around this time. So not many people, kids read Batman, but not many older readers did. And you have silly stories, you have reprints, some of these stories that we've already seen here. This might be the silliest era of Batman. 1962, he's teaming up with a character called Bat-Mite. And Bat-Mite, like Mr. Mxyzptlk, Superman's nemesis, has magic powers, and he's always trying to cause trouble for Batman and Robin. And you see, this is pretty silly. This would not fit in a Christopher Nolan Batman movie at all. Or it might. That would be a lot of fun. You did have occasional serious Batman stories, like Robin Dies at Dawn in 1963. But these were kind of the exception rather than the rule. You saw mostly kind of silly, kind of goofy Batman stories around this time. And what you might not know is this was almost the end of the line for Batman. This was, sales were down low. They were actually talking about possibly canceling the Batman comics at this time. So this might be the lowest level of popularity for Batman. But fortunately, in 1964, there was a new direction. So this was called the New Look. This was thanks to recent revivals of characters like The Flash and Green Lantern at DC Comics. The publisher approached Carmine Infantino, who was a popular artist, and editor Julius Schwartz, and they said, "You did wonders with The Flash and Green Lantern and Justice League of America. What can you do for Batman?" So they said, let's modernize Batman, let's get rid of the silly stories, let's give him a new cool costume. And that's when you first see the yellow bat logo, the oval on his chest. And you see a modern, updated, contemporary crime-fighting Batman. So this, believe it or not, was one of the most influential Batman comics ever in history. So the next year, 1965, Batman with that yellow oval on his chest is fighting the Riddler. And the Riddler had been a very minor Batman villain in the 1940s. He had 2 appearances in 1948 and then disappeared until 1965. And here's Batman and Robin fighting the Riddler. And the important thing about this comic is that a television producer named William Dozier had this comic when he went to the ABC network and proposed a Batman television series. And they liked the idea, and they said, let's use this Riddler character. And the following year, Batmania, 1966, you have Adam West and Burt Ward. And this was the most popular show on one of the most popular shows on television in 1966. I saw this in reruns when I was a kid in the 1980s, loved it, still love it today. And this changed everything. So this made Batman an incredibly popular character. The TV show was huge. The comic book sales went up. So it was a great moment for Batman. 1967, the comic books introduced Batgirl. So this would be a very important character. This is Barbara Gordon, very popular character to this day. And the TV show continued along, and the third season of Batman hit in 1968. And by this point, the series was getting a little bit silly, as you can see from the surfing competition between Batman and the Joker. Things are a little bit silly. Serious comic book fans are not sure that they like this direction for Batman. I loved it, but not everyone did. So this actually marked kind of the tail end of the Batman TV show. Ratings had gone on the decline, and they canceled the TV show, even though they had last-ditch efforts to save the show with characters like Batgirl being introduced. Was not enough to make the show popular enough to bring back for one more season. So as you can imagine, the Batman comic books got pretty silly around this time too. But the next year, 1969, artists like Neil Adams and writers like Denny O'Neil wanted to take Batman comic books in a serious direction again. So here, this is December 1969. Batman decides to leave the Batcave, set up operations in downtown Gotham City. He stops teaming up with Robin on a regular basis. Robin goes off to college in this issue and has solo adventures. Batman has solo adventures. And they're trying to undo and go a different direction from what the TV show had gone. So they're trying to be more serious in the comic books. And you get characters like Man-Bat showing up in 1970. So characters that are come from more of a horror angle. So mysterious, dark, brooding characters like the Man-Bat show up. 1971, we get Rishi Al Ghul. So he's an international, immortal eco-terrorist. So this is a completely different direction from costume characters like the Joker and Catwoman and the Riddler. So he represents a bold new direction for Batman, and readers love this. So this was a real turning point for Batman as a character in the comic books. This is a typical 1972 comic book cover for Batman. 1973, you get one of the greatest Joker stories of all time. So this is the Joker versus Batman and Robin. And you're seeing the Joker appearing more and more. So they're realizing they'd taken a little break from the Joker after the TV show in the comic books. But this is when they realize that the costume characters are really interesting. Characters like the Joker they bring back. This is by one of my favorite Batman artists, Jim Aparo. And Batman merchandise is really taking off too. It was hit peak popularity in the 1960s, right around 1966, but you still had popular Batman merchandise. I had one of these as a kid. This is a Mego Batman figure with a removable costume. Very cool. You can get Batman, Robin, and Superman. So the comic books are continuing, the merchandising is continuing. You still had fun comics like this. This is one of the all-time great Batman stories. There's No Hope in Crime Alley by Denny O'Neil and Dick Giordano. So this explores Batman's origins. This is Bruce Wayne first meeting Dr. Leslie Tompkins after his parents were killed. This is a secret aspect of his origin we hadn't seen until 1976. So 1977, I see the people my age all notice Superfriends. So this was one of the best Superfriends shows. This is Challenge of the Superfriends. Batman was a team member of the Superfriends, featured in every single episode alongside Robin the Boy Wonder. So a whole generation and beyond grew up on Superfriends. This was Batman on TV every Saturday morning, Batman and the Superfriends. And this kind of dominated the public perception of Batman for years to come. It's one of the all-time great stories. So we're seeing more and more Joker stories. This is The Laughing Fish, classic Batman story by Steve Englehart, Marshall Rogers, and Terry Austin. This would be adapted years later. I'll talk more about that in just a minute. But we're seeing classic stories with classic villains. So a lot of fun stories from Batman. And again, you're only seeing Batman on Super Friends. You're not seeing him in live action right now. Batman Family came along in 1979. This is a team-up series. This is Batman alongside Robin and Batgirl and Man-Bat and other popular characters from the Batman family. This was, back in 1979, this book cost an entire $1. That was a lot back then for a comic book. But this was a giant-sized comic, and you got to see Batman and all his friends and allies in one book. And this is a major turning point that happened for Batman, 1980. This is the new Teen Titans. This is Robin striking out on his own with Wonder Girl, the Kid Flash, Starfire, Beast Boy, then called the Changeling, Cyborg, and Raven. So this actually became DC's most popular comic book in the early 1980s. So 1980, Robin strikes out with the new Teen Titans by Marv Wolfman and George Perez. And Robin actually became more popular than Batman at this time. So he had the best-selling DC comic. Batman's title was selling much less than the Teen Titans once this series really took off. So 1981, we snuck a Marvel Comics character into this presentation. So this is Batman teaming up with the Hulk, drawn by artist Jose Luis Garcia Lopez. This was a giant tabloid edition book, Batman teaming up with the Hulk. 1982, we have a mass market paperback called The Untold Legend of the Batman. You could get this at grocery stores, you could get this at bookstores everywhere. But this is the secret origin of Batman, all in one place. This was a very popular book, bestseller for DC, and many people of my generation have very fond memories of this book. And the comic book's still plugging along. Batman's still on TV every day, every Saturday morning on Super Friends. And in syndication, Super Friends is running daily at this time, so you can see this Monday through Friday. And the cartoon, fun, wacky adventures of Batman are kind of dominating public perception of him. Okay, so I mentioned again, 1980, Dick Grayson joins the Teen Titans and is striking out on his own, has a lot of adventures with them, and is spending less and less time as Batman's partner. And he actually didn't have time to be Batman's partner. So 1984, we get Jason Todd. We get the second Robin. Dick Grayson becomes Nightwing. So he gets a new heroic crime-fighting identity as Nightwing, fights crime alongside Batman, while Jason Todd, another young orphan, joins Bruce Wayne as his kid partner. 1985, everything changes. So this is a big event called Crisis on Infinite Earths. Marv Wolfman and George Perez, who did that popular Teen Titans comic, take over the entire DC universe, and they decide to rewrite history to celebrate the 50th anniversary of DC Comics. They basically blow everything up, start all the stories over again, and we get a brand new beginning for Batman, Robin, the Teen Titans, Superman, everybody. 1986, we see one of the most influential Batman stories of all time, The Dark Knight Returns by Frank Miller, with Klaus Janson and Lynn Varley. And this presents not a modern-day Batman, but a future Batman. So this is a Batman who is coming out of retirement. He's much older. He's suffered a lot in his war on crime, and this is Batman coming back and renewing his war on crime in Gotham City. And this was a very influential story. If you talk to comic book creators at Comic-Con today or throughout the weekend, ask them about The Dark Knight Returns, and I guarantee almost every one of them will have a story about it. So 1987, we get this new look. So I mentioned the Crisis on Infinite Earths restarted Batman's history. So they gave Batman a new origin. So Frank Miller, who did The Dark Knight Returns, teamed up with artist David Mazzucchelli and they presented a brand new look at Batman's origins. So if you haven't read this one, track it down. This is one of the most influential Batman comics of all time, and this influenced movies and TV shows, cartoons and comics for years to come. And 1988 is what I would say is a real turning point in Batman's history. This is kind of a dark period for Batman. You've got this comic called The Killing Joke, which presents an origin of the Joker by Alan Moore and Brian Bolland. And this featured a very dark, twisted Joker story. The Joker also featured in this other story called A Death in the Family. And this was a monumental event in comic book history. This was Jason Todd, who I mentioned earlier, was the new Robin. And he did not catch on with readers the way that Dick Grayson had several generations before. So DC Comics decided to see if readers wanted to keep Jason Todd around or not, and they actually had a phone-in poll. So you could actually call in a number and tell people if you wanted Robin to live or die, and readers actually voted to get rid of him. So I know I see some shocked looks in the audience. Yeah, 1988. So readers, by a very narrow margin, by only 72 votes, they decided to kill off the second Robin. So he died in a warehouse explosion. The Joker killed Robin, got rid of him in 1988. So this, as I said, was a very dark time for Batman comics. But a bold new era was right around the corner, 1989. So I actually heard this described as looking like teeth. So this was a billboard. This could be seen all around the world. 1988, you started seeing this advertisement, and this is how iconic Batman had become by that time. Is you don't see the words Batman on this poster, do you? You just see the Bat logo and the date, June 23rd. So this was a real turning point for Batman. This was the Batman movie that came out the summer of 1989. Kids like me could not wait until June 23rd. We were so excited. We followed the news. We bought every magazine. We followed every preview. And 1989, this movie hit, and this was one of the biggest movies of all time. Absolute blockbuster. Everybody in America, I think, had a Batman t-shirt that summer. This was an exciting movie directed by Tim Burton, starring Michael Keaton. And Batman comic book sales went through the roof. The movie was incredibly popular. Merchandise was all over the place. 1990, I want to show a cover by Norm Breyfogle, one of my all-time favorite Batman artists. He was the artist drawing Batman when I started reading the comics back in the late 80s. And this is Batman in the lab doing some detective work. So never forget, he's the world's greatest detective. So 1991, so even though Jason Todd, Robin, had been killed off in 1988, DC still liked Robin. They thought they didn't like that character, but Batman needs Robin. He needs a sidekick. So immediately after Jason Todd died, they started making plans to bring back a new Robin. So this is Tim Drake, who was the third Robin. He was popular enough to get his own miniseries and then later ongoing series. Very popular character, very loyal fan base in DC Comics. And you also see here, this is Batman and Dracula. This is an imaginary story. This is called an Elseworld story featuring Batman and Dracula doing battle. Batman actually gets turned into a vampire in this story. But don't worry, it's imaginary, so if you want to ignore it, you can. If you want to read it over and over again, you can do that too. But Batman's popular enough that he's going in all these different directions. In 1992, we get another turning point. This is Batman the Animated Series. How many Batman the Animated Series fans here? All right. And I also see some Harley Quinn fans. So this is the series that introduced Harley Quinn, and I actually wrote a Harley Quinn history book too. So I love her too. So this was one of the definitive Batman adaptations of all time. So this is very popular. Kevin Conroy as Batman, Arlene Sorkin as Harley Quinn, Mark Hamill as the Joker. Very popular, very beloved series to this day. The comic books are always changing, so they're always experimenting. They always want to do new, exciting things to grab readers. 1993, in the wake of the previous year's death of Superman, Don't worry, he got better. They decided we want Batman to be popular. We wanted to get Batman some attention too. What can we do to Batman that we haven't done before? And Batman got injured by Bane. So Bane actually beat Batman in combat, broke his back, and Batman went away. Bruce Wayne was too injured to continue as Batman. So the next year we saw his replacement, John Paul Valley, aka Azrael, was the new Batman. You can see him in his suit of armor here. So he was a meaner, angrier Batman for the 90s. He lasted about a year, and readers turned on him pretty quickly. So they wanted to see the original Batman back, so that happened by 1994. And comic books, they tend to shake things up every once in a while just to remind you why these characters are classic, why we love the original Batman, the original Robin, the original Superman. So they are not, DC Comics is never afraid to shake things up. I mentioned Harley Quinn earlier. This is a comic book featuring her origin by Paul Dini and Bruce Timm, who created her for Batman, the animated series. Great story called Mad Love. It won multiple Eisner Awards. The Eisner Awards being the top award in the comics industry given out at Comic-Con every year. So great story. If you haven't read it yet, please track it down. So 1995, I mentioned the Batman movie in 1989. There was a sequel in 1992 called Batman Returns. This is Batman Forever. So just like the comic books go through serious and silly periods, the movies did too. So the movies got a little bit lighter, a little bit stranger. You had Jim Carrey as the Riddler. You had Tommy Lee Jones as Two-Face, and Val Kilmer stepped into the Batsuit. This also introduces Chris O'Donnell as Robin. And again, Robin is an adult, so you don't really get to see a kid on stage or on screen as Robin. You get to see an older boy wonder. But the comic books are still experimenting. 1996, you get one of the all-time great Batman stories, The Long Halloween. This is a year-long murder mystery. Batman has to uncover the secret identity of the holiday killer. So this is a dark, serious Batman story by Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale. Highly recommended. And this might be peak silliness for the live-action Batman. This is Batman and Robin, came out in 1997. So you see Batgirl, you see George Clooney, you see Chris O'Donnell. Bright, flashy suits. This is directed by Joel Schumacher. And George Clooney to this day still apologizes for killing the Batman movie franchise. He thought forever. He thought this was the end of it, 1997. Wasn't his fault. If you see the movie, he's perfectly fine as Batman. But it's really over the top. It's got Arnold Schwarzenegger as Mr. Freeze, Uma Thurman as Poison Ivy. If you're in the right mood, it's a really fun movie. But if you're not, it's pretty silly. And it did well at the box office, which a lot of people don't realize, but it wasn't quite popular enough to justify continuing this particular film franchise, so Batman went away for a while. The comic books, meanwhile, literally shook things up with an earthquake hitting Gotham City. So the entire city was ravaged by a massive earthquake. You can see here, this happened in 1998. This is an event called Cataclysm. So the following year, they spent an entire year with Gotham called No Man's Land. So the government withdrew support from Gotham. They walled it off, and it was this lawless, dangerous place. And only the people who could not get out of Gotham City and the heroes like Batman and his allies stayed behind. So this is a very bold, very dramatic story, and this took an entire year in the comic book. So Batman protecting Gotham City without his Batcave, without all his usual resources. Incredible, really fun story. 2000, we looked at Batman in the distant future. So in the year 2039, a young kid named Terry McGinnis discovered this, met up with Bruce Wayne, who was older, retired, and Bruce Wayne passed along his Batsuit and served as a teacher and mentor to Terry in a series called Batman Beyond. And this is a great series by the same creators of Batman, the animated series. So this is Batman of the year 2000. 2001, we got back to a contemporary adult Batman who teamed up with the Justice League. It's a great series on Cartoon Network. Batman is getting into more superhero adventures. And we also saw an all-time great Batman story called Hush, which appeared in the pages of the Batman comic book in DC Comics. So Jeff Loeb, who wrote The Long Halloween, teamed up with superstar artist Jim Lee to present Hush. This is a year-long murder mystery. A year-long mystery featuring Batman uncovering the secret identity of Hush, a brand new villain for the 2000s. A lot of great Batman stories. You get to see Batman teaming up with Superman in 2003 in a series called Superman Batman. I don't know why Batman didn't get top billing. Superman's older, so he probably pulled rank there. So they teamed up in this ongoing series in the tradition of World's Finest comics, where they used to team up and fight crime together. And Batman constantly reinventing himself. I think if you've got nothing else out of this presentation, you'll see Batman is constantly updating and reinventing, and you're seeing bold new versions of him over and over and over again. So as popular as the Batman the Animated Series was, as much as everybody loved that, they had to shake things up every once in a while, so we get to see a new direction for Batman in 2004. This is a series called The Batman. Jeff Matsuda was one of the top designers for this show. So you see a younger, more bold, more dynamic Batman in animation. So 2005, everything changes again. Christopher Nolan, with Christian Bale as the actor, take over with Batman Begins. So this is a look at Batman's origin. This is really influenced by stories like Batman Year One, and also The Dark Knight Returns plays a big influence on this. And Christopher Nolan actually did a trilogy of films. So this is the first. So 2005, big blockbuster movie, Batman Begins. And in the comic books, again, Batman always changing, always evolving. So you see Tim Drake on the cover here in his Robin outfit. But this is where Batman learns that he has a son. So a son named Damian. The mother is Talia, who's the daughter of Rishi Al Ghul, one of his greatest villains. And she had a little secret for him. She showed up in 2006 and introduced him to his son, Damian Wayne. So Batman took him under his wing, and Damian eventually became the new Robin. So Tim Drake became Red Robin. For those of you keeping score at home, Dick Grayson was still Nightwing, and Jason Todd, who'd been killed in 1988, came back and adopted the identity of the Red Hood, who we first saw in 1951, who's the Joker's identity. And Jason took that from the Joker and reclaimed it. And again, I hope you're all keeping score. You can ask me all these questions, and I'll go into long, long detail if you want to know more about this history. So 2007, this is a fun story by artist-writer Darwin Cook, who teamed up a classic character, Will Eisner's Spirit, with Batman. So this is just to see some fun comics that are coming out along the way. Okay, 2008, another game changer. This is The Dark Knight. So Heath Ledger as the Joker posthumously got an Academy Award nomination for his performance as the Joker. And this was really, a beloved movie, blockbuster. This as big as Batman Begins was, this was even bigger. And on TV, they went the opposite direction. So Batman the Brave and the Bold had Batman in a very fun, lighthearted, comedic animated series. So Batman teaming up with all the greatest heroes in DC Comics. 2009, if you wanted to be Batman, if you wanted to play Batman video games at home and get the whole experience, Arkham Asylum, a blockbuster best-selling video game series, kicked off in 2009. And this is, to date, one of the most popular, beloved, exciting Batman video games ever produced. So 2009, what can you do to top that? They actually killed Batman. 2009, Final Crisis. Bruce Wayne fought Darkseid, one of the biggest, baddest DC Comics villains. Darkseid obliterated Batman. Don't worry, he got better. But Darkseid sent him back in time, and Bruce Wayne disappeared for a while. So taking over in this series, Batman and Robin, Dick Grayson takes over as Batman, and Bruce Wayne's son Damian takes over as Robin. And he's a tougher, edgier, more dangerous Robin who is raised by ninjas. So this was a really fun series. This is by Grant Morrison and Frank Quitely. That takes us to 2010, Return of Bruce Wayne. I mentioned he'd been sent back in time. I know you were worried about him. But you can see Batman dressed as a bat back in the caveman era. So even though he'd kind of forgotten who he was and he'd lost his way, he still knew bats were really important. He dressed as a bat and fought his way all the way through time, made his way back in the year 2010. And the next year, 2011, he comes back, reclaims the mantle of the Bat, takes over as Batman, and starts a new international crime-fighting organization called Batman Incorporated. And he actually sort of franchises the Batman identity and has a Batman in every nation around the world that he trains personally and improves, and he takes his crime-fighting mission to the next level. So 2011, DC Comics starts all over again. They have a special event. It's a big, massive crossover thing like the Crisis on Infinite Earths back in 1986. So they restart DC's history all over again. So 2011, we get a new Batman. We get a new Batman #1 for the first time since 1940. So Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo reintroduce and reinvent Batman for a new generation. So that direction for the comic books was very popular. Batman was the best-selling comic book in the entire comics industry almost the entire time that Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo were in charge of his adventures. 2012, Christopher Nolan finishes off his Dark Knight trilogy with The Dark Knight Rises. We see The Catwoman by Anne Hathaway, and we see Thomas Hardy playing Bane. So Bane actually became surprisingly popular as a result of this movie. So I still see people online quoting Bane. I'm sure we're going to see probably 50 Banes on the convention floor this weekend. But this was the conclusion of the Dark Knight trilogy. We saw a cartoon called The Brave and the Bold earlier that went the opposite direction of the movies. 2013, we got a look at an animated Batman called Beware the Batman, and this actually followed a little more closely to Christopher Nolan's direction. This was a darker, edgier Batman. This only lasted for 2 seasons. Unlike Gotham, which started in 2014, this lasted 5 seasons. Very popular look at the origins of Bruce Wayne. So after his parents were murdered, he was raised by Alfred to become the world's greatest crime fighter. And this is a look at Gotham City and the events that shaped him and what led him to become the Batman. 2014, Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo take a look back at Batman's origins in a series called 0 Year. So one of the interesting side effects of rewriting DC Comics history from time to time is that you occasionally have to update Batman and his origin. So we got 0 Year in 2014. This is a fun look at Batman's early years. 2015, the video game franchise still going. Arkham Knight, incredibly popular Batman adventure game. And we're going to keep going. So 2016, DC does their Rebirth initiative. So we get a new writer on Batman. We get Tom King. And he presents a mature, sophisticated look at Batman in the Rebirth era. And the fun thing about Batman is you're seeing so many different incarnations of him. You're seeing light and dark. You're seeing funny, zany. You're seeing serious. So to contrast the more serious Batman adventures that you're seeing in the comic books, you get things like this direct-to-DVD adventure starring Adam West in one of his final roles, and Burt Ward coming back to reprise their roles as Batman and Robin in an animated adventure called The Return of the Caped Crusaders. And again, you're getting all these different incarnations of Batman. So 2017, one of my favorite Batman movies, the Lego Batman movie. And this is the perfect contrast between light and dark, comedy and serious adventure, all in one character. So the Batman, voiced by Will Arnett, takes himself way too seriously, but that's what we love about him. And that makes for one of the best Batman movies of all time. Next to that, you have Justice League. So Ben Affleck in the Scott Snyder directed film. Again, Ben Affleck, surprisingly popular. He's got a very dedicated fan following as Batman. 2018. So this was to be the wedding of Batman and Catwoman. Writer Tom King spent a year building up to it. And how many of you know how this turned out? Okay, so this got national press. So even though Batman and Catwoman looked all set to join forces and find true love and happiness, it was not meant to be. So she broke off their engagement, left him standing on a rooftop on Gotham City. He's still trying to get over it, but we're optimistic. We're looking forward to seeing what's coming next in the comic books. And 2019, big year for Batman. This is Batman's 80th anniversary. And to celebrate, we had the 1000th issue of Detective Comics. So this is a great cover by DC superstar Jim Lee, co-publisher, really great artist. So this is Batman and the Joker. Up front is Batman's son Damian. And this is a look at the Batcave. You can see some of the trophies that they have, including the penny, the giant dinosaur. So again, great cover, great year for Batman. 2019, so this is Detective Comics 1000, a real milestone. And DC celebrated by having, not quite 1,000 covers, but they came pretty close. They had a lot of special covers for Detective Comics 1000. These are tributes to Batman's history. So you have Steve Rude paying tribute to the 1930s. Batman the Animated Series artist Bruce Timm paying tribute to the 40s, doing his version of a classic cover by Jerry Robinson. And you got the 1950s Batman with the Night of 1,000 Batmans. I've got a tribute to the 60s Batman. Bernie Wrightson doing the 70s Batman. Frank Miller doing that gritty 1980s Batman. So we didn't get to see that on the first Dark Knight cover that I showed you, but this is Batman and the future Batman sidekick, Carrie Kelly. So she was a new female Robin. Okay, Tim Sale and Jock doing the 1990s and 2000s Batman. Artist Greg Capullo doing the 2010s Batman. And that brings us back to my history book, which is coming out this fall from Inside Editions. I'll be signing posters right after this, so if you have additional, if I somehow didn't manage to cover your favorite Batman or answer all your questions, this will be out in the fall. So this has introductions by Michael Keaton, Kevin Conroy, the voice of Batman, and Denny O'Neil, who's one of the most influential Batman writers and editors. And for this book, I got to interview almost everybody I wanted who ever had anything to do with Batman. So I talked to Kevin Conroy, I talked to Diedrich Bader, I talked to Mark Hamill, and it was an absolute blast. I got to talk to a lot of my favorite Batman writers and artists. And I see kids in the audience who are the same age I was when I first discovered Batman. And yeah, it's been a lot of fun. It's been, it feels almost like I've been studying him for 80 years, doing all this research. And I want to thank everybody for coming out. I hope you're all having a great time at Comic-Con. And let's give a warm round of applause for the Comic-Con Museum and the staff here. Okay, and if you stick around, I've got free promotional posters, and I'll be happy to sign those and talk Batman with you. So thanks very much.
Hey, give it up again for Andrew Farago from the Cartoon Art Museum in San Francisco.